Hi, everyone. Welcome to Marketing for Humans. We're glad you decided to join us today for what promises to be a great session on bringing some humanity back to B2B marketing. I'm Bill Kahn, VP at Scribewise. I'll be your host today. At Scribewise, our focus is on humanizing complex conversations, creating those connections that help businesses help their customers. We call this brand dialogue, which we believe is fundamental to all business relationships, as I'm sure many of you do as well. So a little bit about today's event and why we think it's important. If you're a marketer, which I imagine most of you joining today probably are, you know how complex our jobs have become over the past few years. It's mostly a good thing because it reflects an explosion of data at our fingertips and all the tools we have to capture it, make sense of it, and use it to target and reach our customers a little bit better. However, if you've seen Scott Brinker's marketing tech super graphic, that big gigantic mishmash of all the marketing technology companies out there, you know what a double-edged sword that can be. 10 years ago, we had about 150 marketing tech companies to help us. Now that number is more like 8,000. It's a ridiculous sounding increase of more than 5,200%. The challenge there is that chasing the perfect marketing tech stack, if one even exists, can make us lose focus on the human element of what we do. We start marketing to algorithms instead of people, and we get lost in that maze of tools instead of building relationships. So our thesis statement today is that our job as marketers is to create real connections with our audiences, other human beings. After all, people buy from people. So what to expect today? First of all, a great lineup of speakers. As you've probably seen from the agenda, we have a lot of great information packed into the next few hours. We wouldn't be right if we didn't give you a chance to ask these great speakers some questions. So we'll have a Q&A after each session where time permits. If you have a question, don't be shy. Simply type it in the Q&A box at the bottom of the Zoom screen. And Cassie Drum, who, by the way, has been running the show behind the scenes and up to the event, she'll get to them and she'll get them to the speakers. We'll also have some breaks today. So we have them built into the agenda so you can get up, stretch your legs, answer a couple emails, but just make sure you come back. So we'll pop in and let you know when those breaks are going to happen and about how much time you'll have for each one of them. And then not for today, but keep an eye out for an email from Scribewise shortly after the event with a recording of the event. So you can have all the great information that you hear today at your fingertips later on, so you can kind of pull out some lessons from it as you go along. So now to the good stuff. First up, we have a fireside chat with Natalie Nixon and Lauren Molesky. Natalie and Lauren are going to discuss the need to let go of our rationality to make marketing more effective, balance the use of that technology that I mentioned at the top, and make room for relationships that are uniquely human. So Lauren is our creative director here at Scribewise, and Natalie is a creative strategist, global keynote speaker, and the president of Figure 8 Thinking. She helps leaders apply creativity and foresight to achieve transformative business results and amplify value. She is the author of The Creativity Leap, which many of you have received or will be receiving as part of your registration today. And she's a regular contributor at Inc. and a fellow at the Royal Society of Arts. As we mentioned when you registered, all proceeds of today's event are going to the speakers' charities. And Natalie's charity is the Culinary Literacy Center at the Free Library of Philadelphia. Lauren and Natalie, great to see you. Thanks so much for joining today.
Great,
I'll
thanks,
step
Bill.
aside and let you guys take it away.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody.
Morning. Hi, Natalie. How are you today?
Hi, Lauren. Doing well. Thank you. How's it going?
Great. Thank you so much for being here. We are so thrilled to have you joining us and really excited to have the opportunity for this discussion, whether there's a fireside or bookshelves or whatever we have behind us. So for the next 40 or so-ish minutes, I'm hoping we can really dig in and chat about your take on our event theme, which, as you know, is marketing for humans. I'm really pumped to hear from you about things like what this topic actually means for B2B marketers today, how things like innovation and creativity play such a huge role in achieving that success in our careers that we all dream of. And then of course, I want to touch on some of the really insightful topics you have inside your book, which, speaking of, Natalie wrote The Creativity Leap, which is full of really great concepts and anecdotes and just really good like exercises to practice with your team and to really just really jumpstart that creativity. So I especially love like all the different things in it, and I'm so excited. I pulled a bunch of stuff out so we can chat through them today. So I guess without further ado, I'm going to ask we can just start off right where I like to start off, which is breaking the rules. I'm a creative, so I love to break rules, but I want to hear your take on, why it's so important to break rules and why or how, I guess, rule followers can actually be creative. Because I know you touch on that in your book. So
Yes.
what are your thoughts around that?
Well, that's a great place to start. I would let me also, if you don't mind, Lauren, just to clarify a perspective that I have. You said I am a creative, and I love that. And part of the goal I had in writing the Creativity Leap was to begin to stop siloing, or what I call ghettoizing creativity only in the arts or in the design field, because it's
Totally.
my perspective that to be human is to be hardwired to be creative. It's just a matter of accessing and exercising creativity as a competency. So
I
for
love that.
anyone who chooses to read the book, you'll see that, and we'll get into it. I know I try to parse out a very accessible way to think about creativity. But if we think about a lot of any of us who engage intentionally in creative processes, whether we are engineers, marketing directors, entrepreneurs, teachers, farmers, there is a lot of rule breaking. But here's the thing about breaking rules, and pushing its boundaries. You first have to know what the rules are,
Right.
and you first have to know what the boundaries are. And I studied dance from a very young age, since age 4. And one of the people who I really admire and look up to is the American modern dancer and choreographer Twyla Tharp, who has an incredible book called The Creative Habit. And she has an outstanding quote in that book where she says, um, before you can think out of the box, you have to start with a box. And I love that because it hones in this reality that creativity is not doing whatever you feel like. Creativity requires what I call toggling between wonder and rigor to solve problems. So, knowing the rules, knowing the boundaries so that you can span them, so that you can push up against them, so you can turn them inside out and stretch them, is really critical. And that's the rigor part. It's really getting your fundamentals down, doing that deep focus application work. So that's a really important piece to remember about rule breaking. We first have to understand the rules and understand the boundaries. And then it's a matter of having the courage, and I say this kind of glibly, oh, it's just a matter of having the courage, but having the courage to try to break them now and then.
Yeah, there was something that you also said that really stuck out in relation to that, and that it's this idea that true intuition or breaking these rules really puts bravery before actually mastering the next step. So like you have to be brave to actually like break out and break these rules. Otherwise, you're just timid and you're following the rules and you're never gonna achieve that like sense
Yes.
of creativity. And I love that. I love that statement.
Thank you for latching on to that. And I actually um, borrowed that statement from a movie, which now I'm forgetting the name of the movie.
Did you
Shucks.
mention it in the book? I don't remember.
But it's in the, I reference it in the book. Maybe I'll remember by the end of our conversation. But there's a moment when two characters are speaking to each other. They're young. They're two young women, and they're friends. They're actually in a relationship, and one says to the other, "You have to put bravery before mastery." And I just love that because when
Yeah.
we're thinking about making these leaps, especially creative leaps and creativity leaps, we don't have all the answers yet. Sometimes all we have is this nudge, this intuition that I should go left and not right, that I should move on from this particular career and try to build out my side hustle, that I should work with that person and not this person, whatever the nudge is. It takes a lot of bravery because we have these kind of weak signals that may be speaking to us. And what we take for granted is that intuition is critical for decision making. It's not just this woo woo, frilly add on. I think about intuition as pattern recognition.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, so I think it's very important for us to incorporate that as well into our strategic decision making.
exactly. I mean, also, I mean, in the business world too, there's the idea that having data to back up any sort of opinion that you have or any sort of statement that you make is always looked upon as like, well, you got to have a source, you got to have data, and yes, of course, but there's also this idea that you can have an original thought, and here's why. You can use an anecdote, you can use kind of a connection, a personal story to find your why, to connect that idea. And I loved that, that you really connected that.
Yeah, well, just to build on your point for a second, Lauren, I have a great friend and colleague, Valerie Jacobs, who heads up innovation and insight for LPK, which is a branding firm based in Cincinnati.
Mhm.
And she years ago, and I've just lobbed onto this phrase, I love it. She talks about how stories are data too. And I'm a qualitative researcher. I'm not here to say at all that qualitative research is better than quant or vice versa. That's actually where we need to be moving
Oh,
to the place, right, where
yeah,
we're integrating qual and quant. But if we understand that stories are data too, stories kind of put meat on the bones. The value of quantitative data is that it gives us the bird's eye view. It helps us to zoom out on the 30,000-foot level and help us to see patterns. But
yeah,
what quantitative data cannot tell us is why there was an aggregation of data at point 72 and then it shifted at point 81. It's only when we dive down into what I call the worm's eye view, which is what
mhm,
qualitative research, deep observation, interviews give us, that we can get the nuances of why people don't go to the gym. It might not just be price and location and
yeah.
parking, right? It might be all these other backstage issues that might offer a much more interesting deliverable.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, the idea of, to bring me to the next sort of topic I wanted to chat with you about, is this idea of being able to ask the right questions and just ask questions, and the idea of wonder, which is huge, especially, bringing it back to our theme of really connecting with people, and marketing with people, marketing for people in a different way of just using numbers and the quantitative stuff, asking the right questions. It just really opens things up for things that you didn't even think about before, because you're seeing a different perspective. So I thought that was really something that tied back to our whole idea here
Yes.
of human marketing.
Yeah, oh, I love that you all are framing this day, this conference, in terms of connection and human connection. And connection requires deep listening as much as it requires just we only think, sometimes we only think of communication on the verbal level, but it also requires a lot of ability to observe, to listen actively, and to ask different questions. And asking questions, as Warren Berger likes to say, is a way of thinking. And sometimes we only think about curiosity and asking questions in terms of ignorance. And if I could just build on your reference to wonder, I also really think that's very relevant in your conversations today, and would love to hear later how other people are thinking about interweaving wonder in even a strategic way. Because I know we don't think about wonder as, I know that a lot of my references and the way I build out strategy, I very much embrace those dimensions of our existence that are not necessarily tied to rationality, and yet they're there, yet they are part of the way we live, we process, we sense make.
Yeah, they're like
And
intuitive too. Yeah.
the intuition and wonder is about dreaming, it's about audacity, asking big blue sky what if questions. It's also about awe and pausing. So incorporating all of those things into connecting with the people who are building marketing services and products for is really essential.
Yeah, let me ask you a question, and I think a lot of people might have the same question, just being in the marketing field. So how can marketers sort of incorporate a pause? Because a lot about marketing is telling your story and telling why what you're selling or what you're offering is so great. Like, what would be a good way to sort of sit back and just sort of take it in and absorb a pause and help maybe a perspective client or customer gain that perspective that you want them to gain?
Well, if this is all very much inside out work, and what I mean by that is it's hard. It's going to be challenging to um, only try to deliver pause moments with clients if you're not exercising it and practicing it internally, just in terms of the way you work. And so internally, in terms of the way you work, it could be something that looks like the following. For some companies, they're going as dramatic as Google used to have something called 20% time, where a fifth of the work week, so literally out of a 5-day work week, a Friday,
On that,
they allowed people to tinker and to pause away from the daily grind and to explore other things they were curious about. One of the things that was birthed out of that was Gmail. Another thing that grew out of that 20% time being able to pause was a lot of their DEI work. And I learned that from reading Annie Jean Baptiste's really great book called Building. I think it's called Building for Everyone. She leads diversity and inclusion strategy for Google. So that's one way you could look, but it doesn't have to be that dramatic. If that seems like too much of a stretch, it could be you designate that you call it an experiment, right? The beauty of an experiment is that you don't have to do it forever. The answer could be no, that doesn't work. The answer could be, yeah, what do you know? This is a really great way to move forward. So you could say for the next 4 weeks, every Tuesday, we will only hold meetings with each other, with clients between 10 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. That's it. Every Tuesday for the next 4 Tuesdays.
Yeah.
Which means that those mornings, people can spend more time with their kids. They could sleep in. They could do deeper work. They could do whatever they want when after 2 p.m. Again, however they want to use that time. And I think what people don't understand is that when we allow our brains to pause, it actually makes the neurosynapses in our brains work in the much more dynamic way that they are designed to work.
Yeah.
Also, people just show up to work much more appreciative, more and appreciative and grateful for that grace to not be involved in Zoom palooza for so much,
Yeah.
right? And so productivity actually increases.
I mean, it reminds me almost of, I think of like a kid in the summertime and they're swinging on the swing set. Mom, I'm so bored. Figure something out. That's when creativity comes along. And then they start building something or making something or doing something they wouldn't. And it just sort of brings us all back to our childhood and like just having that, even that boredom causes the wonder. Like, what could I be doing? What could I do?
Exactly. And we only are able to wonder if we design the space and the time. This is a space-time dimension. To design the space and the time to wonder. One of the people I interviewed for the Creativity Leap is an incredible woman, Geraldine Laybourne. She's a real maven in the entertainment media space, and she was the founder of Nickelodeon. And one of the things she experimented with when she was leading Nickelodeon was that they had recess. They had recess every day, and it was really recess. There were like jelly beans, and there was no work, and people just hung out. And then they went back to the work at hand. And there's so many elements of that we understand in primary school education about human development. We need those pauses, and then we forsake them for more air quotes serious stuff later to our detriment.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So I think the idea of the wonder is obviously great, and the next step in that is following up with your idea of rigor, which is like, using those ideas, that creativity, those questions that you might have to sort of work super hard to achieve that next level of innovation and creativity. Can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that, that whole idea of rigor for those who may not have
Yes.
read your book yet?
Yes. And I don't necessarily think of them as steps because they are very copacetic. A lot of times my clients will ask, well, where should we start, with wonder or with rigor? And my answer is yes. Because you just have to start.
They do work
And
in
there's
tandem,
this
yeah.
corollary I reference in the book that I made up, which is that wonder is found in the midst of rigor, and rigor cannot be sustained without wonder. So you're good either way, wherever you start. The two are very much intertwined. But rigor is about discipline, deep focus, time on task. It's about repetition. It's about um, really honing in on the tedium of whatever it is that is your craft. It is often very solitary work, and it's not particularly sexy. And it is absolutely essential. And if we go back for a moment to maybe some of the more traditional ways we might think about creativity is only among artists. So we conflate creativity and art. Artists happen to be excellent at manifesting the ambiguity of process. They wrestle with uncertainty, and they understand that's part of what they have to do in their work. But when we think about if any of you have studied a musical instrument or dance or theater, or think about anything in a traditional artistic form, we all remember those moments at the beginning where it's like, oh my gosh, I have to do scales. It's just this horrible repetition.
That goes back to the box and the rules.
Right. It goes back to the box. It's not particularly fun, and it's fundamental. I'm studying social ballroom dance and hip hop dance. And just the other week, an instructor reminded us, go back to a beginner level class. It doesn't matter how advanced you begin to incrementally get, you have to always revisit the fundamentals. The technique is that box. It helps you to be much more exploratory later.
Definitely. And that totally comes into play when you're thinking about how to talk to people and how to get your message out there.
Yes.
You have to use things like good grammar and things like that to make sure that your message is clear, and then know how to tweak it and get creative in that sense. So
That's right.
I love that whole idea of going back to the sort of the basics, if you will.
Yeah, and that's the rigor. That's a lot of the rigor part.
Yep, exactly. So one thing I wanted to chat about too that you bring up is this idea in your book of the various archetypes. And for anyone who's studied any sort of like philosophy or anthropology may be familiar with them, but there are things like kind of how people, I guess, innately bucket others, right? Things like the everywoman, or the I'm blanking on
The
all.
sage, the magician.
Yes, all
Yes.
these different people, the hero. And
hero.
I loved the idea of how companies are able to, or how even people in their careers or in whatever field are able to bridge the gap or make the leap between archetypes in order to like forge innovation, things like that. And your example was really good in the book, and I was just wondering if you would kind of expand a little bit on how to leap using, connecting those archetypes.
Well, let me know if I'm not referencing the example you're thinking of, but what I recall, the way I was talking about archetypes is I use archetypes as a tool all the time in my advisory work, because it's one of the ways to help. It gives us a visual marker, and it's a powerful metaphor to help us anchor in how are we in our current state, in our present state. Are we behaving? Are we serving our clients? How will we describe our internal culture? So the way that one of the many ways I like to use archetypes is to first use it as a way to identify our present state, because you can't actually map a way forward to a future state unless you have that clarity about the way we currently are approaching marketing to humans. So for example, I've had a client I've been working with recently where their present state has really been kind of the everyday gal man, the everyman.
Yeah.
And but what that has where that has landed them is they're just kind of thought of as a commodity. They're thought of as kind of a fixer. And as through my interview process, what I learned is what they really want to be perceived as magician slash sage. They want to be the service provider that can anticipate the needs, that can help to really do deep listening, so that they are more of a colleague to their clients. So it becomes a really critically important way to help the client anchor themselves and gain cohesion as a group about, yeah, this is where we currently are, and because we want to get to this future state of magician, how does that play out in our work, in our world? And so it becomes a really strategic, tactical reference point over and over.
Yeah, for sure. And it also, it's funny because it works on the other end too, when, you're setting personas for your prospects. So you look at your prospects in a certain light, they have this persona that you've defined for them. And typically, you're tweaking your language, your message, your visuals, whatever, your content experience to what they might want. But sometimes it's like helpful to look outside of that and see, oh, well, maybe they really want to be something else or be perceived as something else. So,
or it can also, in serving the client, it can help them play out multiple possible future scenarios, so that it's not like we're kitchen showing it, is how I say. We're like, ta-da, this is what you should do.
yeah.
But here's what it might look like if you went these 3 or 2 different directions. Based on that, what's most interesting to you? Where do you think you could land in a much more effective space to gain
Right.
market share, etc.?
Yeah, and you're asking the questions to figure that out. So everything all ties together.
I just thought of another example to an earlier question you had about practicing pauses.
Sure. Yeah.
And this is more from a way that a company has exhibited so well. Have any of you been in your kitchen with the television on, and we are subscribers to Comcast cable, but there is this moment where the Calm app has this ad that pops up. There's a moment that pops up, and all it shows a beautiful green leafy environment. It's raindrops coming down, and all it says is, "Do nothing for the next 15 seconds."
I've seen this.
Right, and
it's great. And you're like, okay.
it's right. You're like, you pay attention. It's not chatter in the background. It's a really inviting image. But I think that's such a beautifully effective example of practicing what the brand preaches and engaging people from the onset to be curious about this. Tell me more about this app. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I don't know, for me, it kind of brings in this whole thing about less is more when you're trying to communicate sometimes. Like sometimes you don't have to over explain or over, bullet point everything out. It's just kind of if you have the right message or the right words or the right numbers or whatever it is, you kind of inspire that pause because you force someone to really think about what you're saying without saying it for them.
Correct.
So I love
Absolutely.
that. I love that concept.
Yes.
So I want to talk a little bit about this idea of the fourth industrial revolution. In our digital world today, there is all kinds of technology, AI, smart everything, cloud, machine learning, all this great stuff. And it's awesome. I mean, especially for marketers, business people, like it's such great insight into kind of how people think and how people learn and how people use different products and technology and stuff. But I also like how, it doesn't ever feel like, or maybe I should ask your opinion on this. Do you think that the need for the human approach is ever going to go away because of all of this stuff? And sort of what are your ideas around that?
Yeah, I think that ideally in this fourth industrial revolution, which is here, the leaders, the companies that make room for the human will be the ones that flourish. Because in a world where we now know that we can, in fact, work from anywhere, The next normal won't, I don't think, be this all the time. It will be some sort of hybrid version of digital interface and in person. But we're going to have a lot more flexibility and options about the way we work, where we work. So in this world where we know that we can in fact work from anywhere and work from home, those companies and those leaders that work at the intersection of productivity, digital technology, and meaningful connection, meaningful human experience, will be the ones that flourish. And right now, we've got the productivity down, or maybe we've got the constant work down. I don't know if that's productivity, but we've got some version of productivity down.
Right.
We're getting better at digital interface and using technology, but it's that meaningful human connection and meaningful experience, employee experience and customer experience. And I'm biased, but in my view, the driver that will integrate those three is creativity. And so the opportunity is that as basic tasks get taken over through automation and AI, the companies that are going to encourage people to show up as their full human selves, to integrate pauses and curiosity and be more improvisational and integrate intuition into the way we make decisions, will actually be optimizing that technology and will be able to attract and retain the best people. So creativity is going to be an increasingly important competency just to drive human factors.
Yeah, and it's like it's impossible to commoditize creativity. So we're lucky in that respect. And I think that, you know, sometimes there's this delineation that people draw between the idea of B2B marketing and everything else. People think, oh, you know, business to business, it must be buttoned up. It can't be creative. It can't be out of the box. You know, if you use hot pink, somebody might flip their lid.
But look at T-Mobile.
Exactly. I mean, you look at things, you know, I don't know. As someone in the design field for my whole career, I vote, you know, there's just certain rules that you learn, you know, kind of growing up in the industry, and it's, you just don't do certain things. And I like the idea that, well, we're still marketing to humans. So, you know, whether you're in a business or you're in the consumer, you know, product, whatever field, you know, you're still a human making a decision. So
well, if I could also just add another example on top of T-Mobile and you know, breaking the rules a bit, you know, if you look in the healthcare space, one of the health insurance companies that has been nudging the big blues is Oscar Healthcare. And when you talk to a lot of leadership in healthcare insurance, they'll say, yeah, but they don't come from healthcare insurance. They're really a tech company. And there's a lot of breakdown in the services, which I don't argue with,
right.
but we must pay attention to how powerful their disruption was because they didn't come from health insurance. They were able to look at the space in a very different way. And in fact, the way that they are communicating to potential and existing customers has been quite effective. The user experience, the more simplified way to explain an incredibly dense and complicated set of offerings has gained them some real leverage. So we can't, especially when we come from these legacy sectors and these legacy industries, our default can't be defensiveness, and it can't be, well, they're not that good about blah blah blah. I mean, pay attention to what they are doing well and what can you learn from that, because if you constantly have a too big to fail or hands on the hips attitude, as I call it, you're going to miss the lesson. You're going to miss the opportunity about what it is that they're doing well, that we're actually so, you know, entrenched in the way, this is the way we've always done things. You're missing the boat.
Exactly. And it's those companies that are going to really break free and make that bold statement and disrupt, like you said. I love that. I love that concept and makes a ton of sense. So I really wanted to chat about this idea too that you had about jumpstarting creativity. And I love sort of icebreakers and things that kind of get the creative juices flowing. And you had this section at the end of your book, just sort of exercises or like a list of all different ways to, think outside the box, put a different twist on things. And one of my favorite examples that you had was, what if you tried explaining an idea only with doodles? And of course, that one's my favorite. I love that one. It reminds me of, I don't know if you've ever played the game Telestrations.
No, but I'm writing it down.
Yeah, it's a great game, especially with family. Like it's just really fun where you basically, there's a word and somebody tries to doodle out what the word is and everyone else has to guess. And it's great because, you really start to see like the wheels turning in people's heads and they're doodling and, it's not like you have to be like a great artist or anything. You're just doodling and it just like inspires so much creativity and I love it.
Right.
So my question to you is, what's the biggest thing that you do sort of to jumpstart your own creativity? Like how do you're having a day where you're just like, oh, I just can't get into it. Like, what do you do?
I'm a very kinesthetic learner, and movement is always my go-to. So what I typically do is go for a walk, and that literally just clears my mind. It helps my mind to not be so focused on the problem at hand that I've been staring at. I also take daydream breaks. Sometimes they're as short as 90 seconds.
Mhm.
A lot of times they can be as long as 5 minutes. And I literally sit outside on the front steps and watch the clouds go by. If it's a cold day, I stand by a window. And it's always incredible to me how much more recharged and refreshed and re-energized I return to the work at hand. So for me, it's about, and I had a conversation on a podcast yesterday about this. We have to not be afraid of embodying our connecting the dots between the way our minds function and our bodies, and be much more aware of our bodies. And that includes everything from awareness that by 10:30 in the morning you're like literally hunched over like this,
Yeah.
and you're stiff, and you have to time breaks intentionally to walk away, even if it can just be 5 minutes. But we're literally physiologically not designed in our bodies to sit in one position for long periods of time. It's just not healthy. And
Sure.
so I think that's an opportunity that will come out of this COVID-19 quarantine, hopefully, are for people to experiment with new ways of working. You don't have to be constrained to the old ways.
Definitely, for sure. Trying to go through here and see what else I had. We chatted about a lot. Well, is there anything else that you wanted to kind of talk about before we open it up for questions? I know that there's kind of a lot a lot that we didn't cover, that you've.
I think we covered quite a lot. I'd love to share. I can share in the chat with everyone who's showing up. And first of all, so thank you, Scribewise, for making the book available to attendees. I really appreciate that, and thank you for giving a donation to the Free Library Philadelphia, the Culinary Literacy Center. I grew up in Philly. I was a library kid. I love libraries. I was a real bookworm, and so that institution has deep meaning for me. So I really appreciate that. But what I want to share is a link to the Wonder Rigger tip sheet, and it is something that everyone can download, and it gives you 16 techniques of ways to amplify wonder and rigor in your life, your personal life, and in your work. So I'm just adding that into the chat. Did I write that right? Yep. So I just added that in. So definitely check it out. And yeah, let's open up to questions from the audience.
Yeah, Cassie?
Thanks, Lauren and Natalie. We have a couple questions. I wanted to start with this one just because, Natalie, you were just talking about COVID and some of the positive changes that might come out of it. So one attendee asked, how has COVID impacted creative energy, and how do you think we can combat this kind of pandemic-induced intellectual fatigue that a lot of us are experiencing right now?
I think there's been a spectrum of ways that the COVID-19 quarantine has impacted creative energy. I think on the one hand, that old adage that necessity is the mother of invention has really sparked a lot of creative workarounds in people. And so I think it's important for us to remember that creativity doesn't just have to be these radical, revolutionary, exponential aha moments. A lot of times it's small, minor tweaks throughout our day, throughout our week, that's adding value to the way we feel about ourselves, our lives, our work. So, for example, ritual is an important structure to add to build creativity. And during the COVID quarantine, a ritual that I added was been doing my best to get to sleep by 10 p.m. every night so I can get 8 hours of sleep. The older I get, the more I'm becoming appreciative of how much rest is. And in the morning, when I wake up, within the first hour, I do my ablutions, I pray, I meditate, I write in a gratitude journal, and I stretch my body. Sometimes I only have 5 minutes. On a great days, like this morning, I was able to do a 20-minute stretch. And more than anything else, it's about keeping a promise to myself. And the cool thing about ritual is that a ritual doesn't have to last forever. You don't have to put that kind of pressure on yourself, but it does help to anchor you in. And for me, that particular ritual, I happen to be a morning person. You got to figure out what your jam is, where you feel most energized throughout the day. When you need that kind of antidote, design it into your day. And ritual is a really great opportunity that I think that we can build out of the COVID-19 quarantine.
I love that. Wish I could be a morning person.
What would it doesn't,
Or maybe it's a night person for me.
it could be lighting a candle before you go to sleep for 5 minutes. Just remember to blow it out. It could be, I don't know, making sure you read 2 pages of fiction every day. I mean, I don't know, but whatever it is for you.
It's a great idea. Yeah.
And rituals should be additive. They shouldn't be something like, oh, I got to do this now. It should be something that you look forward to, that can add value to your life, and stick with it. See what you start to see shift.
Yeah, wonderful. Another question that we got, John Miller says, kudos for your leadership in asking questions regarding SEPTA's Art in Transit project, which was in the news this morning. And he asked, did it take courage to question the prescribed plan?
Oh, thank you for that question, John. You know what? I didn't even know it was in the paper this morning, so now I have to look at that after this. I knew that it was coming soon. You know, I really appreciate that question because I have served as an art commissioner I'm actually rotating off this June, but I think it'll be about 4 years, 3 to 4 years I've been an art commissioner. And we all, as art commissioners, bring different skills, expertise, perspective to the table. Some people are landscape architects, some people are bona fide designers, some people are planners, you know, it's a whole range. And I've already mentioned I'm from Philly. I am African American. There are moments when there are agenda items that come to the fore where there's more of my personal history, my personal perspective and connection to the topic, in addition to the expertise and skills that I bring. And there was definitely there have been moments when, especially when things involve socioeconomic disparities, or they're affecting particularly African American communities in Philadelphia, where I look around, no one has asked the question yet, and I'm the one who raises my hand. And I do play a balancing act of I want to always give my colleagues an opportunity to raise the question, but I'm never too shy to do it. And in that particular case, what's being referenced is there's a new redesign of a septic station in Old City at the Sixth and Market Station. And what I observed was the original proposal, the artist Tom Judd, the images were kind of like what I recall when I was in second grade in public school in Philly, and we went down to the Betsy Ross house, and like I'm this little black girl from Philly, but like all I see are old white guys with like powdered wigs. Like I literally like tuned out. I was like, there's nothing here for me. Like, okay, I guess that's the history of Philadelphia. And then I get older and I study the history of the United States, and I realized it's a much more nuanced, interesting, and complex history. And in particular, in the Old City neighborhood of Philadelphia, that was a Black neighborhood because Black people tended to be the stevedores. They had to be close to the docks. They were part of the sail weaving industry. I'm talking about like late 1700s, early 1800s. And so I raised the questions about, how might you reflect that diversity? And we engaged in a conversation. And to Tom Judd's credit, he incorporated that feedback and those questions and references, referrals I gave him to other people to talk to incorporate that. Because I thought it was particularly important also because that's a real touristy part of Philly, and I don't want folks from Sweden or Hong Kong to come through and think like that's it, like that's the only story that matters. So there are definitely moments where it takes courage because I don't think diversity and inclusion are Black people's issue. I don't like I really don't get why it's like when issues around DEI come up, like people look at the Black person or the Latino person or the Asian, like I don't get that, like because racism, for example, is a two-way. There's a perpetrator involved, right? So we all have to be brave to raise the question, to raise our hand, to ask why isn't something included. It can't just be the same people asking the question. So yeah, there are definitely some days more than others where it takes some courage because as a Black American, we go through all the time, especially when we are in spaces where we're the only one of a few, where you don't want to only be viewed for your ethnic identity. You want to also be viewed and appreciated for the expertise that you bring. So thanks for that question. And I'm going to read the article when I get off.